Well, tonight, news organizations that closely cover the banking business are reporting Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has subpoenaed records from Germany's largest bank, Deutsche Bank. According to Bloomberg News, Mueller issued a subpoena to Germany's largest lender several weeks ago, forcing the bank to submit documents on its relationship with Trump and his family, according to a person briefed on the matter. According to a report in Reuters, a U.S. official with knowledge of Mueller's probe said one reason for the subpoenas was to find out whether Deutsche Bank may have sold some of Trump's mortgage or other loans to Russian State Development Bank, VEB, or other Russian banks that now are under U.S. and European Union sanctions. The Financial Times reports Deutsche Bank has begun sending information about its dealings with Donald Trump to U.S. investigators, following a subpoena by Robert Mueller. A person with direct knowledge of the German bank's actions told the Financial Times. The production of Trump-related documents had begun several weeks ago. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting Deutsche Bank received a subpoena earlier in the fall from U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office concerning people or entities affiliated with President Donald Trump, according to a person briefed on the matter. The subpoena requested documents and data about accounts and other dealings tied to relationships with Mr. Trump and people close to him, the person said. The bank has lent more than $300 million to entities affiliated with Mr. Trump, according to public disclosures. Today, a spokesperson for the president's criminal defense team said, "No subpoena has been issued or received. We have confirmed this with the bank and other sources." The White House press secretary echoed that this afternoon.
No subpoena has been issued or received. We've confirmed this with the bank and other sources. I think that this is another example of the media going too far, too fast, and we don't see it going in that direction.
Deutsche Bank refused to confirm or deny the stories and issued a statement saying that the bank takes its legal obligations seriously and remains committed to cooperating with authorized investigations into this matter. Deutsche Bank has lent the Trump Organization hundreds of millions of dollars for real estate ventures and is one of the few major lenders that has given large amounts of credit to Trump in the past decade. Jared Kushner also has financial ties to Deutsche Bank. The Washington Post reported in June, 1 month before Election Day, Jared Kushner's real estate company finalized a $285 million loan as part of a refinancing package for its property near Times Square in Manhattan. The lender was Deutsche Bank. All of which brings us to the Trump red line. And like most political red lines, this one was created by reporters asking leading questions about red lines.
If Mueller was looking at your finances or your family's finances unrelated to Russia, is that a red line?
Would that be a breach of what his actual
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yes.
But if he was outside that lane, would that mean he'd have to go?
Would you
No, I think that's a violation.
That was the president speaking to the New York Times in July. And with today's reports about a subpoena involving Donald Trump's banking records and banking records of his family, of course, this happened.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, has Mueller crossed a red line with Deutsche Bank? Has Mueller crossed
Thank
a
you
red
very
line?
much.
Has Mueller crossed a red line?
Thank you.
Joining us now, Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an MSNBC contributor, David Cay Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who founded DCReport.org and a former chief of staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, and to senior aide to President Obama, and also a former chief counsel to the House Judiciary, the Senate Judiciary Committee, Ron Klain. David Cay Johnston, tell us about the Trump relationship to Deutsche Bank.
Well, Deutsche Bank is the one bank that will loan to Donald without hiding it through other entities. He has been borrowing money from them for a long time. Deutsche Bank has been deeply involved in laundering money for the Russians for a long time. It's paid in total somewhere north of $22 billion in fines for improper activities, and I don't think all the fines have been levied on them yet. And over $600 million of that was just for laundering Russian money in Moscow, in Germany, and in New York City. So long, very deep ties, and they aren't just limited to Donald. Wilbur Ross was vice chairman of the Bank of Cyprus. The other vice chairman was a Putin appointee. And who did they hire to run that bank? The disgraced and removed chairman of Deutsche Bank.
Jill Wine-Banks, what do you make of these subpoena reports?
I think this is the next step in the Mueller investigation. They are following the money. It's something that I've been urging for a long time because I think we are going to see some connections between Russia and the Trump family. It's not just the president. As you noted, Jared has almost as large a debt to Deutsche Bank. And I think we can find out a lot about what might be motivating the policies of protecting Russia and praising Putin.
And Ron Klain, a lot of talk today about the red line and the possibility of Donald Trump seeing this as a reason to fire Special Prosecutor Mueller. What would happen if the president attempted to fire the special prosecutor?
Well, we'd have a constitutional crisis like we haven't seen since the days of Watergate. If he attempted to remove Bob Mueller for doing his job, investigating, as Jill suggested, where the money has gone, what the financial incentives for Trump to appease Russia and to collude with Russia might be. If he fires Mueller for doing his job, we're going to see a conflagration. And I think the start of impeachment proceedings and maybe even the kind of outrage that even the Republicans in Congress can't blink at and can't look away.
And David, I know you've done a lot of reporting on Donald Trump's finances over the years and talked to him about it and gotten close to it and his casino businesses and all sorts of things. You know how he reacts when people get close and they start studying this. Imagine for us the reaction in Donald Trump's world today when he discovers the reports about this subpoena.
Oh, Donald is absolutely livid inside about this. Remember that Donald creates his own reality, and something is now happening not under his control. He's also going to try and move that red line because what they're doing now appears to be directly connected to the Russian influence in his campaign and is not outside the scope by any means of Mueller's charge here. But Donald's also a guy who beat 4 grand jury investigations, so he's not an amateur at this. And by the way, I'm not as sanguine as Ron is about the constitutional crisis. I mean, look how the Republicans have moved now towards Roy Moore to stay in alignment with Trump. They got a real problem trying to go against Trump because they'll get primaried the way Jeff Flake was going to be.
Jill, imagine, if you will, the president making a move of some kind to fire Robert Mueller. There's a large office in place now of prosecutors, FBI agents who are working under Robert Mueller. Do they all just disappear if the president fires Robert Mueller?
Well, that's an interesting question. And on the night of the Saturday Night Massacre, which I, of course, would like to point out to the president, led to a huge public outcry that caused the president, Nixon, to reverse course and give us the tapes and appoint a second special prosecutor. So that's a warning to him. But there was a question the day of the Saturday Night Massacre whether the office had been abolished, whether we had been fired, or only Cox. And there was a debate whether if we hadn't been fired, we should quit in protest. And Archie Cox said, no, you know this case better than anyone, and unless and until you have been fired, you must stay and continue this investigation. It turned out that the office had been abolished, but as part of the public outcry and the reaction, it was reestablished. And so we actually never left the offices, but we had been abolished. So the president can fire Mueller, and if he leaves the staff in place, they can continue without him or under new leadership. But it would be, I think, a political mistake because I think even though the president seems to have more Teflon than any prior president in history, this might be the thing that causes the public to go, enough is enough. Stop.
And Ron Klain, there's been this controversy erupting over the president's private criminal defense lawyer saying that the president cannot commit obstruction of justice because he's president, an argument that we went through during the Nixon administration. And now we have a refinement on that, offered by Ty Cobb, who's the inside the White House on the White House payroll lawyer who's watching all of this. And he cites Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz on this. Let's listen to what Alan Dershowitz says about it.
You cannot charge a president with obstruction of justice for exercising his constitutional power to fire Comey and his constitutional authority to tell the Justice Department who to investigate, who not to investigate.
So, Ron, the Dershowitz position is a president can commit obstruction of justice. You can charge a president with obstruction of justice, but not for anything that falls within the president's constitutional duties.
Yeah, so I think Professor Dershowitz is wrong on the merits. Presidents who do things for corrupt reasons can be prosecuted, or at least called into impeachment for that. And what I'd say is the only people who believe the position that Dershowitz and Cobb and Sekulow have taken are people on Donald Trump's payroll. But not even everyone on Donald Trump's payroll believes that. Attorney General Sessions, when President Clinton was subject to impeachment proceedings, said that a president could be impeached for obstruction of justice. So this is a ridiculous position. It has no broad support in the legal community, and it's not going to hold up under scrutiny.
David, tell us how you would see Donald Trump in the middle of that discussion in the White House on this issue of can the president be charged with obstruction of justice?
Oh, well, Donald would absolutely argue that he is above the law. He certainly doesn't know his history about King Charles I, who, of course, was beheaded after asserting that the king can do no wrong. Donald, remember, doesn't understand the Constitution. Nobody asked him during the campaign, would you tell us the duties, powers, and limits of the president? He doesn't know what they are. He thinks that he is a dictator, or should be a dictator, and that he's above the law. But of course, Donald's thought that his whole adult life.
Jill, we got to hear you on this question that Professor Dershowitz is saying that, yes, it's possible to have obstruction of justice charges against a president, but not if it is for something that is within the president's constitutional duties.
Well, first of all, let me go back to something that was just said. I'd also like to say King Henry VIII. When he didn't like things, he beheaded people, or he changed the church. He got what he wanted that way. And that's what Dershowitz is suggesting, is that the president can do anything he wants. And I agree that when there's a corrupt intent, nothing is legal. And so Dershowitz is wrong, John Dowd is wrong, and Ty Cobb is wrong. Not only can he be indicted for, and the question of indictment may be an open question, but he certainly could be charged with obstruction, and he certainly could be impeached for obstruction. And all of the things that we've been talking about are, I believe, clearly obstruction. I think there's enough evidence of acts that are intended to stop an investigation. I recently reviewed the indictment in the Watergate case, and so many of the things that I read could be changed to Trump as the defendant. So,
and Jill,
yes.
And Jill, obstruction of justice was one of the impeachment counts in the House of Representatives against the President Nixon, wasn't it?
Yes. It absolutely was, and another was abuse of power. So even if you accepted the argument that it can't be obstruction of justice, the president can abuse even his constitutional powers. I would argue that if he started to pardon everybody who was involved in this case to avoid the investigation going any further, that would be such an abuse of power. Even though he has unlimited power to pardon, that would be a crime. And I don't think we should let the president get away with crimes.
And Ron Klain, the thing that has always inhibited presidents in these directions, like unlimited pardoning of your friends, especially first-term presidents, is the desire to be reelected, is a notion that there are political limits to what you can do, that the electorate won't go with you beyond some limit. And Donald Trump never seems to have observed that.
No, look, he does have a very strong support base. And as David said earlier, the congressional Republicans have tolerated all of Trump's outrages thus far. But I do think that there are some lines here and some places where even the Republicans may get off the Trump train. And if we're talking about things, as Jill mentioned, corrupt intent, abuse of power, that may be where the line is drawn. Either way, I think it's up to all of us to hold President Trump accountable and for this investigation, this Mueller investigation, to proceed and to reach its conclusion and to let the chips fall where they may.
Jill Wine-Banks and David Cay Johnston, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.